ICML 2019 is great because there are so many lymphoma specialists from around the world that come to this. The leading science is presented here. A number of doctors will wait and present their information at ICML. So there's always a good source of information for us. All the diseases are covered, all the different subtypes. So there's amazing research that's presented. One of the biggest issues right now in the lymphoma community is CAR T. What do we do with CAR T, and is it the right treatment for all lymphoma patients? So right now we like to stress it's only available for patients with large B-cell, in most cases diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And what is happening here is we're trying to figure out why exactly does it work for some patients and not for others. So there's lots of discussions about how do we make a new, better CAR T that will maybe have attracted different molecules within the cancer cell so that it works better. What we do know right now is for a percentage of patients, it's good and it's potentially curative. I'd like to stress potentially. The data is really short term right now, so we only know that some people are going into some durable remissions in the short term. We also don't know if there are long-term side effects from CAR T. We know about the short-term side effects for sure. So there's some discussion around cytokine release syndrome and how do we minimize that so patients are not as sick during the process. Still an outstanding issue is the neurotoxicity associated with CAR T therapy. Doctors don't know how to make that better yet. So lots of things that need to be figured out with CAR T so that maybe it can be expanded to other lymphoma subtypes. Maybe. The data in that is not in, though there are clinical trials happening. And for the patients within large B-cell lymphomas that are getting CAR T already, how do we figure out who is the right person to get CAR T, who will be effective for, and who it is probably not a great treatment, so they need to look at some other kind of therapy to help them cope with their lymphoma. What we've learned, especially in diffuse large B-cell at ICML, is that there's still work to do to figure out the different subtypes within diffuse large B-cell itself. So how do we figure out who's going to respond to treatment the best way? And in the past, we have split diffuse large B-cell into germinal center and then an activated B-cell center. And we know that those people who have an activated B-cell don't do as well. But what we've found out since is there are actually more categories. So doctors are now looking at splitting diffuse large B-cell into 4 different groups and figuring out efficacy and treatment options by those categories. Now, that still has to be figured out in a test that's easy to administer and is universally easy to interpret, and that's not quite there, but we're getting there. What we also know is that there have been a bunch of trials looking at different first-line therapies because traditionally people get R-CHOP, and that chemotherapy regimen has a lot of toxicities associated with it, but right now those are not proving successful. They're not showing a better survival rate, so R-CHOP remains the standard of care. But there are other options for people that can't tolerate that, and so some of those new therapies are discussed here, including things like lenalidomide, which are showing some efficacy, and there's a potential for maybe some other treatment decisions based on this information, which is good. Especially for people that relapse and are not going to qualify for CAR T, we need other options for that group of people. R-CHOP is successful in about 2/3 of patients, but of course that leaves 1/3 of patients that need something else so that they can survive their lymphoma. Another interesting topic that came up in relation to diffuse large B-cell is the fact that patients who have had diffuse large B-cell have a much higher rate of autoimmune diseases than other cancer patients. It's always been assumed, I think, that cancers are sort of all created equal in terms of long-term side effects, diseases, and a higher rate, for instance, of secondary cancers. But in diffuse large B-cell, they actually have a much higher rate of autoimmune diseases. Now, that may be related to the fact that their immune system is so poor post-diagnosis, post-treatment, but it's again something that should be screened for in a clinic, and if patients are getting symptoms of autoimmune disorders, then they definitely need to discuss with their doctor and be treated as soon as possible. Mantle cell lymphoma is is interesting. At ICML, the discussion has been around the introduction of BTK inhibitors into the standard of care for mantle cell. So this is something that you might see in clinic soon. A switch for patients, especially those that are not doing well on traditional chemotherapy, the next best thing really for them is a BTK inhibitor. There's one approved in a number of countries already, but there are more coming to market, and there is some proven survival benefit, which is important in this patient population that has a high rate of relapse. What's been important at ICML here really when we look at lymphomas that are related to breast implants, and specifically we're looking at breast implants that are textured, those are the ones that have been linked to lymphoma thus far, is that there is a higher rate of lymphomas in women that have received a breast implant because they have previously been diagnosed with breast cancer, and they've received the prosthesis because they've had surgery for their breast cancer. So what's important about that is it's much higher than we've seen in the general population reports that have been released to date. In this case, we're seeing them in it's a little bit more than 1 in 500 women. So it's really important for doctors to communicate if a woman has a textured breast implant, make them aware lymphoma is a possibility, make them aware of the screening opportunities. If caught early, this lymphoma is highly treatable. As well, it provides women with an opportunity to discuss whether or not their implant should be changed. I think one of the main things that I'm going to take away from ICML 2019, there are a lot of talk at this meeting about chemo-free regimens. And I think what we really need to focus on is what is the best treatment for any individual patient, and that may be a chemotherapy and it may be one of the newer agents. I think from a patient perspective, what you really need to ask your doctor is what is going to meet my needs. Am I looking for a cure? Am I looking for a better quality of life? What is important to me as a patient? And then what is the best treatment option for me? That should be the focus, not whether something is a chemo or whether something is chemo-free.